Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council's website. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones, switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you're in the hall, obviously you can do this on your iPhone or iPad, but I'll probably notice your hand up anyway. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it's intended as part of the discussion. Usual standing orders apply, including any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting so we can keep track on whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly, taking their time and speaking directly into the microphone when making contributions. When referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. First item, Sedrant and apologies. Claire, would you be able to provide the Sedrant and any apologies, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. We currently have 13 members present, 3 members in the hall being yourself, Councillors Beretti and Councillor Scobie, 10 members present on Teams being the Vice Chair, Councillor Brodie, Ferguson, Justy, Hagman, Ingalls, Malcolm Johnston, Councillor Jordan, McCammon and Marsh. 2 members currently not present being Councillor Stevenson and McGregor. I've been advised that Councillor McGregor is expected to join the meeting later.
Thank you, Claire. So I approve of members' remote participation.
Councillor Jordan's wishing to come in.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Jordan?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to say that Councillor Stevenson is just caught up in another meeting, but will be along very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Jordan. That's helpful. Declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest or statement of connection they wish to make?
Item 7, Chair. I'm a member of Swestrans and there's a report on the audit of Swestrans. So, declare our interest.
Thank you. So is that a statement of connection, if you like?
It's one where the audit is just reporting back, so it might be rather just a connection rather than interest.
Okay, thanks. We'll make sure that's noted. So we move on to item 3, which is minute of the previous meeting for 13th of February. Can we note the minutes of the meeting? Okay, a few nodding heads, thank you. Then we move on to item 4, which is external audit plan for 2023-24. We have Gillian Ross and Gordon McAllister here to assist if members have any questions. Gillian or Gordon, anything to add to the report before we start? So you're still muted, Gillian.
Apologies. Just to say that I think Gordon will provide a presentation on the report just to cover a brief overview in terms of the details, is my understanding, so I'll pass to Gordon.
Thank you. And just before we do, Councillor Driver, you wanted to come in this?
No, it's okay, Chair. I'll wait till I see the presentation.
Thank you. So I think over to Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you and good morning. Our annual audit plan for the 23-24 financial year starts on page 17 of the committee papers pack. Both the content and the format of this year's annual audit plan are similar to the plan we presented to you last year. However, there's just a few things within this that I would like to cover. Starting on page 23 of the papers, which is page 7 of our report, Exhibit 2 outlines the significant risks of material misstatement that we've identified for the annual accounts. As you can see, we have identified one significant risk. This relates to management override of controls. This can be considered a generic risk as it relates to all public sector organisations and is driven by the auditing standards, and as such we are required to consider it a risk for the Council. In addition to the significant risk, on page 24 of the papers, which is page 8 of our plan, paragraphs 18 and 19 note a further 2 risks of material misstatement which we have not deemed as significant risks, but we've identified as areas of audit focus. The first risk relates to the estimation and the valuation of land and buildings. This considers the level of subjectivity and the use of assumptions in the specialist valuations. Land and building assets are a material balance in the accounts, and therefore we consider this to be a risk of material misstatement. The second risk considers the valuation of the pension balance, which is a calculation which relies on a number of assumptions made by the actuary, and this is also a material balance to the accounts. The Code of Audit Practice also requires auditors to consider the wider scope of public audit in Scotland, with our work not just being confined to the financial statements. On page 27 of the papers, which is page 11 of our plan, we note the areas that we'll be covering as part of this wider work. This work will include following up on prior year best value recommendations, and will include our findings from this year's best value work, which we plan to present at the June 24 meeting of this committee. Taken together, this will feed into our assessment of best value at the Council. Our findings and judgments from the wider code work will be reported in our annual audit report, which will be presented alongside the audited accounts. On page 29 of the papers, which is page 13 of our plan, Exhibit 3 shows the anticipated dates of the completion of our audit work. A further timetable for the completion of the final accounts audit is detailed over the page on Exhibit 4. You'll note that the planned date for sign-off of the accounts is at the end of October, and we appreciate this is slightly later than the target date of the end of September. As you know, Audit Scotland is working to get back to pre-pandemic delivery timescales. We have made considerable progress in the prior year, but we recognise that we still have a way to go. John Cornett, our Executive Director of Audit Services, wrote to all Chief Financial Officers on the 12th of March, highlighting the challenges. John set out that Audit Scotland has set a target of returning to delivering 95% of pre-pandemic timelines by the end of this audit appointment round in 26-27. In order to support this, Audit Scotland has recruited additional audit services staff and has an ongoing audit modernisation programme in place. John also attended the recent meeting of the Local Government Directors of Finance Group to explain the challenges. Therefore, we've agreed a timetable with management which we feel is a realistic timeframe to complete and sign off the audit. In addition to this, for 23-24, we've also committed to sign off the audits of the Pension Fund, the Integrated Joint Board and Sueztrans by the end of September. Finally, I'd just like to take members back to page 20 of the papers, which is page 4 of our plan, specifically paragraph 8, and highlight that during the course of the year, should members be aware of any issues with known or suspected fraud, we would invite you to raise this with us at the earliest opportunity. As part of our risk assessment for this year's audit, both management and internal audit have confirmed they're not aware of any such issues, and this is consistent with our own knowledge of the Council. I'll pause there, Chair, and I'd be happy to clarify anything or answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks very much, Gordon. And I think just on the matter of the timescales, we've got a special meeting scheduled in to be able to hear that, so that's we can maybe touch on that later. But Councillor Dryborough?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. And just coming back to those two risks that were mentioned, 3 risks that were mentioned before. My understanding that this is normal for the accounts to actually consider those risks as, you know, where they are. And secondly, the first bullet point on page 14, looking for best value, for instance, I noticed on page 30 in the audit fee that there has been a substantial increase of £22,000 for the audit fee. And I'm just wondering, when you're looking at best value, perhaps Gillian could maybe answer this one. She'll probably have advice from other councils how much that audit fee has actually went up. We are obviously paying for a service here that provides us with financial and legislative requirements. Is that best value, in your opinion, From the auditor's point of view, coming back to the two significant risks and the one other in the pension, that is an annual risk. I believe that over the last number of years we have seen in every report from any of the auditors we've actually seen.
Thanks, Councillor Drybrough. Gillian?
Yes, with regards to the audit fee, this is a fee that's set nationally across all the local authorities, and the increase represents a 6% increase in the fee. Now, Audit Scotland do have the ability to have flexibility within that level in terms of the overall fee that we charge. There's a minimum level and an upper level, and my understanding is that Audit Scotland have set the fee at the minimum level, so we are getting the best value, and that fee, I understand, is determined based on the quality of the working papers and the extent of work that will be required by the auditors. So in recognition that we've had quite a good working relationship with Audit Scotland and they're quite happy with our papers, we are at the lower end of the threshold, but I'm sure Gordon will be able to confirm that that's the case as well.
Thanks, Gillian. Gordon, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks, Gillian. As you say, our fees are set centrally by our audit appointments and quality team at Audit Scotland, and we agree them locally. They're set at an expected range, and that's where the fee for the council is at. Local auditors do have the discretion to increase the fee, as you mentioned, if there was issues with particular risks or the quality of working papers. There's more information. The breakdown of all the fees for all of our audited bodies is on the Audit Scotland website as well. And also just to add that, as a councillor noted, the fee is made up of a number of different elements as well. And with the main part of that being for the financial statements audit work, but also there's a portion in there attributed to the best value work, the performance audit work that obviously the reports came to the committee last year as well.
Thank you. Archie, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, and with regards to the risks that were mentioned in page 8 of your report, we've had several reports over the years, as you can imagine, and these risks are highlighted, I think, every year since, because they are a potential risk, not something that's going to happen.
Absolutely, yeah, Councillor Drybrough. These are the first risk, the significant risk that we've identified, management override of controls. Every Audit Scotland plan, you'll see this risk because it has to be considered under the accounting standards, ISA 240, and we're not able to rebut it. With regards to the other two risks, which we've identified the risk and material misstatement, given this is year 2 of the audit, and we've got that knowledge from our audit last year, that we never found any particular issues in these areas. We don't regard these as significant risks. We regard them, but we do regard them as areas of audit focus, given the size of the balances, and if there was an issue in there, it would probably be material. So you're absolutely right, and I think from your point of view, from a committee, I could take assurance that these risks are risks that we'd expect to see, and we haven't identified any other risky material misstatement.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And I think the evaluation of other land and buildings, I know a few years ago we did actually take action to improve how we were doing that independent valuation based on an audit report. So.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Beretti.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You've actually just touched on the point that I was going to bring up. Being a new councillor, it's interesting to see that there's a 5-year rolling basis, and what I would like to know is this set in stone? But I would also like to compliment the team that wrote this, because it's an eminently readable paper. This didn't have any difficulty going through it, which I thought is quite unique. So thank you very much for the team. But yeah, based on this 5-year rolling basis, given the geopolitical problems that we have at the moment, how much would you say that this is a good way to do things?
Thank you, and thanks for your comments on the plan. Yeah, so the the accounts are prepared in line with the SIPFA code, and the code requires the council to have its non-current assets valued over the 5-year programme. There is some caveats in between that, and that around 20% should be valued each year, and that should be a variety of different asset classes. The council do have a 5-year contract with an independent valuer who provides these valuations. In addition to this, an exercise is carried out to ensure that there isn't a material movement in the assets that haven't been revalued in year as well, and that's able to usually give the council assurance that there's not been a material movement.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I'm looking at page 27, wider scope and best value of the report, particularly under the financial sustainability. And where it's not a significant audit risk, I take that to mean 23-24, because it goes on to say financial environment which the council, along with other public bodies, is operating in, has been identified as an area audit focus. And then you go on to say, or the report goes on to say, you know, in terms of our annual audit report will include comment on the council's 23-24 financial outturn, along with 24-25 budget and its medium and long-term financial plans. I'm really looking at this from a social work and education perspective, where we know social work are under severe pressure in terms of demand-led budget, and we've got difficulty in terms of delivering for additional support needs in that field. And I just wonder, you know, what the comment is in terms of medium long term, whether we are at risk and maybe not coming close to not delivering our legal requirement.
Thanks, Councillor. This particular wider scope risk, we've identified it from a risk assessment process where we go through it. We have a number of meetings with different council officers. We look at a number of different documents. We carry out a number of different pieces of work to identify risks throughout the council. I think this has been included in the plan, as we'd say, more as a kind of generic risk, as it recognises the challenging environment for all public bodies and in particular local government bodies. So the work that we'll be carrying out in response to this, we'll be doing over the next few months, and then on this we'll be commenting on that in our annual audit report. But I'll certainly take on board your comments of those particular areas of focus as well.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up for questions, so with that, if we go to the recommendations, we've been asked to review and comment on the external audit draft plan. I think we've had a look at that, so happy to move on. Thank you. So that takes us then on to review of council-wide risks, information management. We've got Mark Thompson and Nick Evans here to assist members if they have any questions. I think there's actually a typo, I've just been informed by Claire, in the actual recommendation. So on page 35, 2.2, I think it should read, consider the implications of the information management risk on council activities and rather than workforce. So I think that's maybe a legacy issue from the last committee. Mark and Nick, anything you would like to add to the report at this current time?
No, just to apologise for oversight and letting that typo through, Chair. But the paper and the risk speaks for themselves, but both Nick and myself will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So, Councillor Beretti.
Thank you, Chair. Page 36, I know that you've highlighted the minimisation of paper produced through digital technology. Given that some other item agendas talk about cybersecurity, and given that we've had the incident in Dumfries and Galloway with the NHS, do you think this is actually a good thing or a bad thing, this minimisation of paper, or is there some alternative?
Yeah, over to you, Mark.
I think Nick's probably best placed to answer that from an information management perspective, Chair.
No, thank you. So Nick on screen, if you're happy to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I guess the move to paperless has to be balanced against, as Councillor Barretti's question suggests, the requirements for security, etc. So members will know that we have a secure app, that papers are viewable in. Most papers are public, clearly, but where we have any exempt papers, they're accessed via a secure app. And we're actually just in the process of enhancing security because we're just about to implement integration with Azure AD, so single sign-on, etc. That will be coming forward shortly. But yeah, we work with our suppliers to consider security at all times, and always look to enhance things. But yes, the security that we have in place meets all the requirements for government agencies, etc. And it's all verified as being as good as it can be. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Nick. Tony?
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that. I have other questions, but I'll happily let others come in first before I ask them.
I think, Vlad, you want to add maybe a comment on this one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think that's it's a very important and valid question in regards to, in essence, the move away from paper into the technology, but the technology and the paper both have their own risks associated, obviously, in terms of management of files and ongoing filing, which may not be properly managed, and then thereafter the risks associated with, obviously, cyber attack in particular, which is the next risk in relation to where our storage of that information might be electronically. As Nick's highlighted, the important thing is that we keep our systems up to date and that we are ensuring that our systems are as robust as they can be, and also that we don't hold all our eggs in one basket. So as you'll know, we don't have one system, we've got various systems, so if one system goes down, other systems can still work. So that's probably important to know, but I'm probably straying into the next item rather than the information management one.
Thanks, Vlad. I was just going to ask, obviously technology and systems can move at an accelerated rate, and often it's the staff using them that maybe it's that assurance around the training and how the user interacts with the systems. Is there an assurance that we can get in that? Nothing sort of leapt out from the actions particularly. Is there any comfort you can give on that one? Presumably that would be to Nick again.
Yeah, I'll maybe jump in, Nick, if that's okay. You can just come on the back of that. In terms of our overall information strategy, what we're trying to do is ensure that we've got the right systems, and that includes also processes around how we manage that information, ensuring that everybody has the right authorisations and knows how to manage and record keep within that in terms of our retention periods. So all of that being managed in that electronic and process management way is the way that we keep the council safe moving forward, which obviously it's much easier to do in that automated fashion rather than through the paper form, which we would have through filing.
Okay. Thanks, Vlad. So I can see Councillor Hagman's hand up.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, I think that we are in danger of moving into the next item, and my question was going to relate, but because we've been discussing it here, I thought I'll ask it now, so we're not maybe repeating the same points again. I'm really aware that back in 2017, 2018, there was a significant issue with our library services and accessing data. And I'm just aware that following that, I believe that there was potentially training, as touched upon maybe yourself there, Chair, about the access of training. Was there learning taken forward from the issues that occurred back in 2017-18 in terms of our library communication systems, and how has that ever been followed up? I'm aware that we've now got perhaps new leads within our digital teams, and I believe, I think it was before your time, Vlad, so you're maybe not aware of that, but it might be quite useful just to follow up on where we were in terms of any lessons learned from that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hagman. Yeah, so this may be straying somewhat into the next statement a little bit, but so Nick, would this be one for yourself?
I don't think so, Chair. I'm not familiar with the difficulties that were described there, or the rectifications that were applied. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. I think Mark's volunteering here, so
Yeah, just to offer that's one I think we would need to speak to other officers, so we'd provide feedback to committee members after this meeting once we gather the relevant information.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Hagman, is that sufficient for now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate it was quite a while ago, but there's always learning to be had, and just to make sure that we follow up on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barretti, you intimated you had loads of questions, so I think the floor is yours at the moment.
Thank you very much, Chair. Page 41, it refers to, in the very bottom box, working from home policies and use of confidential waste. Now, the two aren't unnecessarily connected, but does working from home going forward, does this mean there is a greater risk from data breach? Because in the comments box, there's nothing. And the second one, the use of confidential waste, does everyone know that if you have something, and we've had something this week, which I had to bring back to council for disposal, and I know that, but that's not stuff like this cannot be thrown into a normal bin. So what is the situation around those 2 points?
Thanks. So I suppose in terms of control measures about managing that, so I'm casting a net out to see who's the most likely volunteer. I think Vlad's offering to do this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. All staff have policies in terms of managing all their records, both online and on paper form. So that's very clear as to how certain papers need to be disposed of, and staff are well aware of that, and we've got that at the kind of disposal element of things is available to all staff at all locations. It's just a process that's to be had for that. So in essence, people working from home will probably more likely be online, and again accessing the systems online rather than printing off, and then not many staff will have the ability to print off from council resources at home. So if they needed to print anything off, they would obviously have to come into the council buildings to do so, but all following the policy and procedures, which includes obviously sensitive information or personal information to be disposed accordingly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vlad. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Dryborough.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And I also believe there's some training for members with regards, the different types of reports that we get, whether they're exempt in that in the iTrent situation. So that's good. Just one question, if I can, and it's for clarification more than anything else. In the report, it says in the implications and risks under financial and legal, there are no financial risks associated with this report. It says that in the next one as well. So I won't ask it if I get answered here.
I think you've frozen, but with a very happy look in your face. That's always good.
But the contents of the report, if something goes wrong, there are.
Sorry, Councillor Dryborough, I think we missed a vital part of your question there because you froze on screen. Could you maybe just run that by us again?
All right. Yeah. So in page 36, the implications and risk, it says there are no financial risks associated with this report, and there are no legal risks associated with this report. And that's the same in the next report as well. But if something goes wrong within the workings of the report, Who decides, as part of the implications and risk, and it's point of clarity more than anything else, who decides that there are no financial risks with regards to the report? We've already got the issues, you know, the things that we have in place to those risks not to be met. But who decides? That's a point of clarity for each of these reports coming forward. Because if something was to go wrong, there's obviously a financial risk, there's potentially a GDPR risk and all that sort of stuff going forward. But who decides on the report? Is it the senior management team who are being, consulted on these reports, or who?
No, thanks, Councillor Dryber. I think Vlad might come in. This is one of these sort of areas in between the content of the report and the implications of what's been discussed, and then the report itself, and if it has any implications. But I think Vlad's probably is well versed and be able to speak to this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And it's again a very valid question. It's probably a stylistic matter more than anything. The report itself doesn't carry any financial, legal or workforce implications in our view, so that ultimately that would have been taken at an officer's perspective from myself. But you're quite right, the actual risk itself is attached to the report. Will have its own risks within that, and they will be financial, will no doubt have legal and workforce implications as well. But that should be more within the actual risk itself, not the report. The risk itself has those attached to it, and those particular ones will then flow into the various services that are having to manage that particular matter. So I would suggest that kind of from a stylistic perspective, we're quite content with the report being as it is. However, if members wish for us to reflect some of what Councillor Dryber is saying moving forward in our styles, we're quite happy to do so as well, but just recognising that the risk itself should have and cover that within the corporate risk register that we hold.
Right, so Councillor Dryber, I mean, do you want to see if we can record some kind of comment to that effect, just for clarity?
I think it was the clarity. It was actually on the risk of the report as opposed to the contents of the report. The appendix gives you what you're doing as to, mitigate that risk, which is fine. But I think there are some issues when we get these. Wait a minute, there is a financial risk. But it's about the report itself as opposed to the contents, and that's usually in the appendix. So I'm happy with what Vlad said.
Thank you. It's maybe something that could be covered maybe at a business bureau meeting or something like that to do with templates for reports. Okay, thank you. So I don't see any other hands up on this one. So I think with that, if we're happy to note the measures in place and the planned actions to manage the Council's information management risk as detailed, and I think we've considered the implications of the workforce risk on Council activities. Are members happy that we've noted and considered? Thank you. That takes us on then to review of council-wide risks, cybersecurity, and we've got Mark Thompson still and Chris Edgar here to assist members with any questions. And again, is there anything you'd like to add to this report before we open up to members? Okay, thank you. So, members, a few hands going up. So, Councillor Stevenson, you've not spoken yet, so I think I'll take you first.
Thank you, Chair. I've a few questions. I'll just lump them all into one. At 4.1 on page 47, it says that these are basic certifications. Sorry, we've achieved the certifications. Are these basic ones, or is there anything more robust that we should be aiming for? And on page 51, on the risk matrix, under possible consequences for the council and its community, we actually don't list reputational damage, but we know, having seen what's happened elsewhere, that there is a reputational damage that leads to a lot of uncertainty within the public, and again, no financial implications for lost or stolen data. And I suppose one of the ones that the public will want to know about is under the current risk matrix. We're in the red, but we're not actually moving from the target risk matrix. Why is that, and is there anything more that we can be doing to move that risk further into the green? Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that was about have we got the best standards, the reputational impacts, and then the financial impacts, and then the target risk being the same as the as the current risk.
Good morning, members and colleagues. So just to pick those in order, in terms of certifications, they are standard certifications for UK and Scottish government organisations, and that ranges from councils up the way to government and associated agencies. They are what we aim for. Again, they are standard. They are what we'd expect to have. They set a baseline. I think that's keen to point out at a point. They set the baseline. It's a high baseline, and it allows us to handle up to official sensitive data from UK government perspective. So from that perspective, in terms of the data that we handle, we meet our requirements. There's other things that we do on top of that are specific to the council, but from a certification perspective, we expect to meet them, and we do meet them. In terms of the reputational damage and financial statements missing from the risk, I think that's a fair comment. I think we can put that in. That's just an oversight from our perspective. So apologies for that. And lastly, in terms of the risk being read and it staying read, it's the reality of where we are in 2024 and continue to be going forward from a cyber security perspective. Everything we do, we're always one step behind in some respects. The criminals, the terrorists, the hackers get more advanced every month, every year. We through our certifications, again, we keep up with our defences, and we audit our systems and change where appropriate. But it's a global view. Unfortunately, it's not a local thing for us. It's not a Scottish thing for us. It's a global state of affairs that whatever we do, we will never ever drive that down to a level to be a yellow or a green, just from a state of play as the cyber attacks progress.
Thank you. So I think there's something there that, and maybe we can, when we get to the recommendations, maybe just to record or just to note that when it gets to these being sufficient, maybe just to add those comments about the reputational risk and financial risk as well, if members are happy with that. So are you happy with the answer just now, Councillor Stevenson?
Yeah, I suppose the only question I've got left to ask is, are we doing everything robust enough to make sure that this data is all protected and we're at the lowest risk of a cyber attack that we can be? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, I think the last comment there was just, we're almost like holding the line by the looks of it in terms of the target risk and current risk, and just in terms of what Chris was saying, but in terms of robustness, is there anything you can add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I can't go into specifics in the public forum as to what we do. I'm happy to speak to members privately as to if there's any more information or anything we can expand on. But in terms of our robustness, we have a programme set out that goes from a level of almost defend, monitor and train our staff. So from a defence perspective is where this would come in at the start of it. We have a programme of audit in our systems. So as we've alluded to earlier, we have information management systems, or document management systems that we will audit on an annual basis, and we'll approve where appropriate. And that comes across all our infrastructure within the council. So we will pick an area, we will audit it, we will consult our security partners, and we will see if there's any tweaks or any changes we can do to the system to make it more appropriate. But that's a rolling process for us, and we revisit that constantly. And that sets a baseline for us.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barretti.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Page 51, on the left-hand side, where it has already been mentioned about the failure of this, if there's a cybersecurity failure, which would then, to me, mean that there'd be a total digital failure, and the communications with staff. Now, is this one of those cases where the paper might be might be useful? Because with our current devices, when we lose our signals or whatever else, we lose everything. So we can't remember, and I know I have a terrible memory for numbers, some numbers, not all numbers, but do they then relate to paper?
Okay, yeah. So I suppose what's the fallback, Mark? I think.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So this is where spreads into business continuity and work that we're actively taking forward at this moment in time, and work that a number of services have already completed where there is some key or critical information or some activities that could be particularly vulnerable as well. There are contingency arrangements in place to actually continue those on. And obviously, with a significant outage or failure in some form, contacting staff is probably one of the most critical things that we can do at the outset. It's not without its challenges, but yes, it can give that assurance that that's something that all services are asked to give due consideration of and make sure that we've got appropriate arrangements in place for a range of outages, not just cyber.
Thank you. Councillor Beretti.
Yeah, it's not just staff, obviously, it's also elected members, because elected members also like to talk to each other, and that severely disrupted flow of information could happen as well. Thank you.
I think that's more of a comment there, but thank you. Councillor Dryborough.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just, again, it's part of the clarification on the same page on the right-hand side of why is it a strategic risk. Cost and reputational damage comes to mind, and I'm just wondering if that the loss of the information or key systems could result in complete loss of interruptions, affecting their ability to support the most vulnerable and council failing to discharge statutory functions across the range of services, and therefore the risk is required at corporate service level. Does that include the cost risk and the reputational damage as well?
Thanks, Councillor Dryborough. So I think we've kind of picked this up already from Councillor Stevenson, and maybe this is about where it would go in terms of the report if we were sort of adding those comments. But if I go back to Mark on this one. Yeah,
there's certainly no issue with updating the risk to more clearly articulate those as well, because I think it is a fair point that both in terms of the reputational and financial aspects, they are a consideration. So that wording's easily amended to include those.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't think there's any other hands up on this one. So we'll just go to recommendations, and that is that we've got to note the existing measures in place, planned actions to manage the council's cybersecurity risk as detailed. Agree that these are sufficient, but I think with the addition in the appropriate places of the reputational risk and the financial implications, as members have brought to our attention, and then to consider the implications of the cybersecurity risk and council activities, and I think we've done that. So are members happy to accept that and move on? Yeah. Thank you. So that brings us on to item 7, internal audit reports issued. We have Richard Fox, Susan Martin and Gillian Ross all here to assist if members have any questions. I don't know if any of those report authors wants to add anything to the reports before we open up to members. Richard?
No, thank you, Chair. I've got nothing to add at this stage. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Beretti.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Page 68, when it refers to pupil equity funding, and point 14 is that the audit was done on 30 schools, 25 primary, 5 secondary. What I would like to know is, was this a selective sample or was this a volunteered, because clearly there are more than 25 primary schools within our area, and if the evidence is based on just this small percentage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I guess how representative is the sample? I think, Susan, you've appeared on my screen, so do you want to come in this one? Thank you.
Can I pass to Richard, please, Chair, because he set the sample. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm getting distracted by faces appearing. So apologies, yes, the sequencing was wrong there. So Richard, you first, I think.
To answer your question, Chair, it is not a volunteer sample, it is a randomly selected sample, but with a bias to ensure that at least a couple of the schools were larger schools rather than just small schools. But it's randomly selected.
Councillor Beretti?
Does that mean that going forward, when you do this again, you will be going to a different sample of schools?
I have no particular plan to look at this area again, but if I was to do it again, it would be again randomly selected, as indeed most of our audit samples are for most audits.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson?
Yes, Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure whether it's for this committee or Education Committee, but it's one of my bugbears, and it's to do with the PEF funding. So we have our inclusion hubs, and the PEF funding doesn't always move from the pupil's original school to the inclusion hub if the child needs to be sent to the inclusion hub and have support there. And I suppose when you read the Audit Action Point 2, schools should be supported to find effective ways of using the available funding. It's a bit annoying to see that when you know that the Inclusion Hub could really do with this funding and it doesn't follow the child there. So that's something I would quite like to see. I assume because it's 25 primaries and 5 secondaries, that's maybe got missed in the middle. But yeah, that's a big bugbear of mine, I'm afraid.
So just in terms of the actions, I don't know if that's been captured in a way that we can maybe speak to today. I'm guessing Susan might be able to speak to this first. So Susan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Recognising the points made, last year an allocation at exactly the same level as pupils would receive for PEF was made to the inclusion hubs last year in order to ensure that those young people did not miss out from that funding, and we've been to follow the child to the right place so that that funding is appropriately used. The challenge for the inclusion units is obviously we try to have young people in an inclusion unit for a targeted period of time, for targeted interventions, and then they would hopefully move back to their mainstream setting, which means that the money would be going a bit back and forward. So last year we managed to identify some funding to give the inclusion bases the same amount of funding so that they could target the needs of the pupils while they're with them. And we would hope to make sure that there is some funding put in place for inclusion bases, whether it's at that same level, because it needs to take cognizance of where the young person's moving throughout the year. So we're absolutely trying to crack that one to ensure that those young people are supported.
Thank you. So Councillor Hagman, I think, is next.
Thanks, Chair. I'm conscious we jumped onto the second audit report, and I've got questions in relation to the first audit report. So do you want me to? Are we doing the PEF report first, or shall I just answer all the questions?
I mean, I'm happy to be member-led, so we've gone to the PEF first. But if you want to go to the first one, that's fine, Councillor Hagman.
Well, I've got questions on both. So, while we're on PEF, I'll stick with that one just now. So I'm really conscious on page 68 within the introduction, it makes reference to the fact that the Scottish Government has allocated the funding and provided guidance on its use. And this is money going direct to the schools. It's not necessarily for the council to direct how schools are spending this money. And I'm just conscious, our staff are really under a lot of pressure to deliver. And when this is not actually a council's responsibility to deliver, there clearly is issues because there's 9 or 8 action points coming out of this. I'm just conscious, should Education Committee not be looking at this maybe in its wider context? And I'm just conscious, are we in danger of auditing something that's not necessarily our responsibility? Because the audit was to find out if there was appropriate local guidance, but the introduction says that the guidance is already given by Scottish Government. So I'm just slightly confused as to what the purpose is of this. I appreciate we're looking to close the attainment gap and we want to make sure that it's of best value, but is that not the role of Scottish Government who are allocating the funding for that purpose? And how are we reporting back to Scottish Government so they've got the assurance? As I say, it's a really valuable piece of work, and I appreciate it's come up at area committee, and we do get sight of the funding that is significant coming into our schools from Scottish Government. But I'm just not 100% clear of the landscape as a whole sitting with this. So that's my question regarding that one. The first question I've got relating to the other report, I can ask the question just now and we can come back to it if appropriate, and that's in relation to the revenue budgeting. And there's no mention within the sort of setting the corporate budget or setting the budget services of our trade union colleagues and working with staff. We speak a lot about how important our staff are, and they absolutely are. And, we don't have all the good ideas ourselves. And I'm aware that across the country, trade union involvement is slightly varied when it comes to setting budgets, etc. So perhaps that's one for the budget panel to take forward in its recommendations. But where is the involvement of our trade union colleagues when it comes to setting corporate budgets, setting that sort of wider aim as well? So those are my sort of two main points. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Hagman. So, I mean, in terms of I suppose as with any government policy, ultimately it falls to local authorities to actually deliver those to the people who get the services. So I think PEF is an interesting one and maybe worthy of this report, so we can tease out those questions. But Susan, I think maybe, well, you'll know the most about this in this room. So if you can maybe speak to Councillor Hagman's comment on that, and then we'll come back to the other point afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I think that the intent of the audit report was to very much look that we could provide assurances that we are following the national guidance, that we are doing as is asked of us by government, and that our head teachers are also supported to deliver this policy intent, as in closing the poverty-related attainment gap. And I think you can see from the areas of focus within the audit, we've tried to capture that in terms of our head teachers getting the money they're entitled to, etc., etc. So hopefully that provides a bit of background as to why this report, I think, is valuable for us in terms of, certainly as a service, we saw value in it in terms of the assurances that we're providing appropriate support, albeit that the funding goes direct to head teachers, and that we're making sure that those head teachers are able to deliver using that PEF funding. In terms of reporting directly to government, there is an annual report goes back to government on the detailed spend per school and what areas of the curriculum that has supported, and also where that money has been spent in terms of staffing and or resourcing and or one-off spends. So that money, that goes back on an annual basis to government. We report back now 3 times a year actually to Scottish Government around the spend on PEF, but there's also it's also part of our education annual report that goes back to government, and that gives a bit more detail in terms of some of the outcomes that we're starting to see. And then the final point on that would be probably that Scottish Government, through the Scottish Attainment Challenge team, have just commissioned their own audit, and Dumfries and Galloway have a number of schools that have been identified by them to take part in that national audit, and that work is just starting at the moment. So we'll be able to report back probably through our education plan to Education Committee on the outcomes of the national audit that's about to kick off and take place. So there's sort of multi-strands, but hopefully this audit provides members with some assurances that our procedural efforts in D&G meet those expected of us by government.
Thanks, Susan. So on that particular point, Councillor Hagman, does that go at least some way to providing a bit of context and where things are being reported, etc.?
Yeah, no, that is helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, I should say as well, just as at 4.3 in the report, there will be follow-up to these reports, coming back to this committee 6 months' time, I think it's November, so which will have a look at the action points and how far we've got on with those being delivered or completed. In terms of the other point, just about the revenue budget and the trade union involvement, I presume you're referring to, I think it'd be page 61 or thereabouts. So I think we might have Gillian somewhere on the call, and I do apologise. I should have maybe just focused on Appendix 1 first, but we'll just bounce back and forwards a bit for a bit of fun. So Gillian, just in terms of the revenue budget involvement from trade unions, staff representatives, for example, in the process, in the corporate process, it's not articulated explicitly in the paper, but are you able to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, I think the context that's been mentioned by Councillor Hagman was wider than the remit that the internal audit team have reviewed. But as Councillor Hagman has mentioned, it probably is something for further consideration by the budget panel, in terms of the overall budget process. So there will be a report coming to full council in June that sets out the intended budget process for going forward for the 25-26 to 28-29 budget, and those kind of considerations could be incorporated within there. I think historically the trade union engagement and the wider engagement usually tends to be as part of the wider consultation on the budget process, with the details when we've usually had a significant service savings. And given the kind of approach that we've had over the last few years, that isn't something that probably we've taken forward as part of the previous budget approaches. So hopefully, we can raise that as part of the budget panel and the discussions as part of that and feed into the report for full council.
Okay, thanks, Gillian. And I hope that goes some way towards addressing the point, Councillor Hagman, and I'll certainly raise that myself when I'm attending the budget panel. It may be out with the scope of this particular report, but it's certainly a valid point, so we'll make sure that's carried forward. Did you want to come back in on that, or I'll go to the next speaker?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm aware that the budget panel's tomorrow, so yeah, really look forward to getting that progressed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Ferguson and then Councillor Drybra.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. And good morning, everybody. I'll do it the opposite way around. If you look at the first one, at 1B on page 60, service efficiencies and saving measures are robust, supported and being subject to appropriate scrutiny before included in the budget. And it's only meeting satisfactory, and just a statement, should that not be good? Because we should be making every effort there to make sure it is the best possible outcome we can get. But that's just a statement. Getting back to, I think Councillor Stevens has started it off, and then Katie Hagman came in with some stuff about it, and others have come in as well. The bit about the People Equity Fund is quite clear. There's a lot of interest in this committee on this, and like all good audits, it's actually asking more. It's creating more questions than it's probably giving answers. Probably one of the things that Richard, that's how he's designed it. And I'm actually wondering here whether Katie was right, that this needs to be looked at in more detail by the Education Committee, or the new committees, whatever it's got to be called, because whilst the allocation, right, and the conditions are very much the baby of the Scottish Government, and that's well established, as Susan was explained to us. The performance of our staff in implementing that is our responsibility, right? And that should be going to the Education Committee to make sure that the Education Committee are happy that performance level across the piece. And if and just before anybody comes in and said, yeah, but we'll need to be careful here because we can identify some children. If you actually think back to the Excel spreadsheet that comes from Scottish Government, outlining what every single school in Scotland is receiving, if the schools are too small where they can risk identifying children, they are not included. They're they're left blank. So the data we've got actually makes sure, as much as we can, is not identify children. So I don't think that's a reason not to have it discussed. And even if it does, then there's no reason why the Education Committee can't hear that in camera, because it's very similar to something else we discussed just the other day, is that it's important that we get this right. It's important, and I do understand that each individual school has a different individual need, right, and different individual needs for the children that they're educating. But we need to make sure, and I'm not suggesting here for a minute that our values get put into this, because the values are well and truly set by Scottish Government, what it's to be used for. But we just need to make sure that we are crossing the T's and dotting the I's, because if this was to go pear-shaped, right, and this audit, the external audit from the Scottish Government, was to pick up things that were wrong, we'll be asked why we didn't know that. Right? So we need to guard against that. So I don't know if it's an extra recommendation, Chair, or how you want to do this, but my suggestion is that this gets referred back for a more in-detailed examination by the Education Committee, in particular how our officers have actually conducted, made sure that they followed the guidance and everything else. It's our responsibility, their behaviour and their standards are our responsibility, not the Scottish Government's. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. So, so noted your statement on the first part, and in terms of the second, so I'm looking at page 75 in the report in terms of there is effective reporting of the impact of the funding, and I think this is where I think we've heard that there are returns to the Scottish Government, for example, but I think there is that, the reason why this is of interest to members is because we want to know how effective the People Equity Funding has been in terms of closing the attainment gap. And we do get some reporting of activities carried out under the PEF banner at area committee level, but it's not always obvious at those committees what the impact of that is, and it's not really, I'm not really sure in terms of how that gets fully explored at Education Committee. So there's maybe an action there, I would suggest, if maybe officers would be able to look into that, about how we take forward that reporting in terms of the impact, because that box there in the papers, it doesn't really, it's not clear to me as an elected member in my own locality how that is effectively reported and if there's maybe improvements there. So that's maybe one to take away out with this committee, because it's maybe out with the scope of this particular report. But I don't know if that's helpful, Councillor Ferguson, but I'll certainly make sure that we can have that as an action to take forward in the appropriate channel.
Chair, thanks very much. Yeah, but the only question I would ask on that bit, about item 11 on page 75, why is it only satisfactory? It should be good, because if it isn't good and it doesn't meet the audit of the external audit from Scottish Government, what's going to happen? And there's places earlier there, if we don't use the money properly, if we don't use it all, then they can reclaim it. I don't think they've ever done that. Jill, Susan will tell us if they have or not, but I don't think they have. So we just need to guard against. And that's, I think you're right with the way you've summed it up there, is that where do the council get to go into the detail that we would require of any other service and any other use of a budget? Where the money comes from is really immaterial. It's how our officers and our service actually deliver that function. That's what should be scrutinised. So I understand it's delicate. I understand it's a fine balance, but I still think that we actually need to know as elected members that whatever report goes up to Edinburgh. Now, I don't know. I'm not in education, and Susan will keep me right here. I'm not sure if the report goes to the Education Committee and then goes to Edinburgh, or if it goes straight to Edinburgh.
Okay, thanks. So I think we've already got an action. I think members are probably happy to support that we figure out how best that we improve that local reporting mechanism in terms of locality and perhaps at Education Committee, but officers will be able to pick that up as an action after this or as part of this. Susan, I'll invite you to come in, but first, if I would go to Richard, just in terms of the level of assurance ratings, if you like. So Councillor Ferguson's commented a couple of times on the satisfactory, and maybe there's, I suppose, an ambition there to maybe these could be better than whatever, but effectively we're just looking at what's there at the moment when we do the audit, and these are the findings. So I don't know if you want to say a few words to that, Richard, and then I'll go over to Susan on the education point.
Can I first of all make a comment in general on what the ratings actually mean? Obviously ratings are subjective. Good, I generally interpreted to mean that we've got nothing to add and no comments further to add. Satisfactory is just that, it is satisfactory. If members are to have concerns, it's where it's rated low within the report. On that particular issue, I don't particularly want to discuss in detail because I'm very aware that the council budgets are set through after a rigorous, robust process through member approval. However, there are, and it is very challenging to set a balanced budget in the current political and economic climate. But there are slight nervousness about some of the savings measures that were stated and which I've set out in the report. Hence, that's the reason why it's a satisfactory as opposed to a good rating on that particular assurance.
Thank you. And I think on the one in terms of the satisfactory relating to the PEF reporting.
And similar issue with that, with the PEF reporting, there are minor weaknesses there which I think we can develop the PEF reporting, as I think members have alluded to, which is why it doesn't rate the good. I haven't given it a good assurance, but that doesn't make it bad.
No, I totally accept that. So, but I think we are trying to pick up that action, and maybe that's just a way that we can maybe look towards improving how we're reporting locally. But Susan, in terms of the other points that Councillor Ferguson raised there.
Thank you, Chair. The quick and easy one to answer is, has money ever been claimed back? And no, it hasn't. You're absolutely right, Councillor Ferguson. Whilst there was some concern during last year about potential clawback of funding that was unspent, that did not materialise, so there's never been a clawback. In terms of better local reporting, the annual report that comes to Education Committee, it comes to Education Committee just before it goes off to Scottish Government, so it does come to Education beforehand, but you'll understand and appreciate that PEF is a small part of a huge report that's presented to Education Committee at that time. So I think there's no harm in separating that out, perhaps, and having something separate. But I think possibly through Chair and Vice, Chair, I would take your view on this to come forward as a recommendation from today. But probably through Chair and Vice of Education, we would look at what that report should look like, because clearly the bit I'm struggling a wee bit with at the moment is the scale of that reporting. Obviously, that's a significant amount of funding, and it impacts on a significant number of children across every school across the region. So it's just trying to manipulate that into a format that gives members good quality information and good levels of detail without being the only paper at committee, if you like, because it could potentially be huge. So we probably need some guidance, and we can do that through Chair and Vice of Education and Learning, unless this committee wanted to make further recommendations on that. Is that appropriate, Chair?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point we might not have a very well-formed recommendation, but I think we've already sort of committed to an action point to explore the best way potentially of doing that, and if it does require consultation with Chair and Vice Chair of Education and other officers, for example, Vlad, I don't know if you want to just add a few words just to keep the process proper, as it were. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that we've noted that as an action from this committee for officers to consider the appropriate route for reporting that, and in essence the best format for doing that in that kind of localised way that Chair yourself referred to. So I think Susan's also nodding, so I think that might, it's a clear message from members of this committee that they wish to see that potentially further broken down. So officers will consider that, and through that method that Susan highlighted of further discussions with Chair and Vice Chair within that.
Okay, I think that's reasonable for the moment anyway. So thanks, Vlad. So I'm just double checking hands up here. So Councillor Drivery withdrawn, so that's fine. So Councillor Scobie first, and then Councillor Brodie.
Many of the points may have been covered, Chair. I know Paula referred to transfer of PEF, and I'm looking here at page 71, well, the example being given of funding for 26 pupils who now have 55, but they will not have 55 eligible funding from the PEF. And it goes on to say Council could provide additional funding. Is there no way within that gift? It does state there that the Scottish Government guidance is not to transfer funding between schools, but it's when this, I think Susan referred to, the money follows the child. Is that a preference, or is it something that we can do? Because when I look at the two in that school, the audit action points, and this is where it comes in, is it our responsibility or education in terms of schools should be supported to find effective ways of using available funding, and it's to that action. Does that mean that the money can then follow the child in terms of, and then it does transfer to another school if that child moves on? And I know it's a low priority, but it's just that question in terms of the PEF funding and the PEF following the child in terms of the need. And bear in mind that not all children who are on eligibility of free school meals may not need that additional support. So it's a difficult one to deal with. In terms of, again, page 72, in the absence of effective, where it refers to, I think Katie was touching on, in the absence of effective consultation, schools may benefit from central advice on how to use PEF. And I'm looking at point 1 of the action there, local guidance and to be developed on how the impact of PEF may enhance through local collaboration. In terms of the PEF that's used, and it's used in many different ways, is there a guidance or good guidance in terms of how PEF should be used, rather than it's left to school by school by school? Because it's not clear in there. It just refers to collaboration, but it doesn't say what is the good guidance on it in terms of how PEF is used. My last point here is really on the audit action points. All schools should be encouraged to engage directly with parents, carers and PEF eligibility, unless the child or the parent registers for free school meals. And my understanding is that then they may miss out on PEF. So it's really that word encourage. Is there any way that we could legitimately say that there are X number of pupils in a school, and therefore that should follow that's the monies that's applied for to the Scottish Government to make sure we get maximum benefit from the PEF to then to be used in schools. So it's the word encourage. Can that be strengthened in any way? That every child that's eligible for school meals then would and qualify, the school could apply for them. Is there a mechanism for that? I don't know if I'm making myself clear on that one.
I think, Susan, it looks like you're nodding, but so there's quite a number of points in there, and some of it will relate to how are we comfortable that the actions that have been identified, I suppose, will address the findings of the audit in terms of the control measures or the report we have in place, for example, and we'll get a report back on that and anyway, just to see that those actions have been carried through. But I think, Susan, there's a few points in there just about eligibility, about the money following the child, which is a principle that we do like to see. But then there will be, as you touched on before about the inclusion hubs, there's this potential for small amounts of money going back and forward between things, and there's maybe smoother ways of delivering that wider service around the child if they move, for example. So I don't know if you can pick up those points raised by Councillor Scobie. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think the first thing to clear up is the allocation of PEF funding. So the allocation of PEF funding, we don't bid for PEF funding in any way, shape or form, and actually government use data that was submitted previously for free school meals, number of children entitled to free school meals. It's quite historic data that is then a percentage applied to it. So the school in question that you referred to, Councillor Scobie, that went from 26 to 55, that was new pupils who had moved in rather than pupils who had moved from elsewhere. But the number of families entitled to free school meals was considerably different to it had been in the older data that government used to make the allocation. So again, our hands are a wee bit tied in terms of what we can get from government in terms of this allocation because of the methodology that's used. But what I can make sure that we do is that detailed methodology is shared as part of the follow-up report, so that's really clear for members to follow and to understand in terms of the allocation process. How we then move the money around in the authority, we have to do that with permission from government through our attainment advisor, and that's not something that we can't do, and it is something we have already done. So, for example, if a school has mothballed and those children have gone to a number of schools and they attract PEF funding to the school, that PEF funding has been divided up with approval from our attainment advisor who works on the Scottish Attainment Challenge aspect of government. I think in terms of the central advice on how to use PEF, yes, absolutely, there's a lot of good practice shared, and one of the real strengths that comes forward is that every school receives at least one, often more, visits from the attainment advisor, who is a nationally employed person who is picking up practice elsewhere, not just in our schools, but elsewhere, and sharing that good practice with head teachers specific to the young people in their school. So they're able to really try and tailor the supports that are put in place to support the young person or the young people according to their needs, rather than something generic that says, oh, PEF, you need to spend some of it like this and some of it like this. It is very individual and very much tailored to the specific needs in that setting. But through those attainment advisor meetings and then follow-up meetings with the quality improvement team and their quality improvement officer, those are the discussions that are being had with head teachers to support best use of PEF in order to achieve the outcomes, which is, of course, to close the poverty-related attainment gap. So hopefully there's a couple of things in there. One is around the allocations, and it's not quite as straightforward as we would automatically assume it is, in terms of every child that gets free school meals gets an allocation. It's not quite as straightforward as that, but we work with what we have and we try to move it appropriately, getting the necessary permissions, and then the second thing is obviously that advice, and hopefully that tailored advice schools find more helpful perhaps than something that's a bit more generic.
Thank you. I mean, I think there's a point in there about obviously we would like to make sure that we receive the right amount of money determined on the eligibility criteria, and if there's a delay between when the data is returned and then that being used to calculate a figure, maybe there is a potential gap there. I'm just wondering, Susan, just from that point of view, are we sort of in a trailing wake of funding there just because of when returns are made, or is there a way that we can push for that through our COSLA representatives, for example, or is it a channel that we can feed that data back to make sure we get the right return in terms of the eligibility?
Yeah, so annually, what government did this time around is they set the level of PEF funding across the term of the Parliament, so it doesn't change on an annual basis according to the number of children that you have who are entitled to free school meals. It's been set for the period of the Parliament, which is a further challenge for us. I do think that there will be opportunity for us through organisations like Audit, but also through COSLA, to lobby that position for the future Parliament, because increasingly with cost of living crisis, etc., local authorities are discussing how the numbers of young people that we're trying to support with that same level of funding, or with a level of funding that is not reflective of those in your school at the moment, is difficult for head teachers, and therefore something we should be pushing to be more dynamic in its approach in terms of setting what that funding level is.
Thank you. Well, fortunately, we have the Chair of Education next to come in. So, Councillor Brodie.
Thanks, Chair, for that. It's been really interesting to listen to the discussion on pupil equity funding. As Susan says, we do get reports annually on PEF to the committee, and there has been discussion and questions at that time. But I think there's a great level of interest at this committee, and I think it would be a good idea to separate it out and have a separate report so it can be scrutinised individually by the committee. But that's something we can take forward, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I think, so we'll pick that up in the proper way just through an action. And I think, as we've alluded to, chairs and vice chairs will be involved in the proper way in that process in terms of the reporting. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks for letting me back in, Stephen. I think Councillor Brodie has just actually said what I was going to say, and it was what my fear was when I saw this in the agenda, is that this would end up a discussion about how we implement PEF in Dumfries and Galloway, where and rather than take away from the reason for the report is the audit and the auditor's view on what how it's working, what we could do to make it better, what we're doing well, etc. So I think Dick Brodie's actually just given the answer I was looking for, Chair, and it's a bit unfair in Susan, because she's managed admirably answering questions, but a lot of that would be covered in a report, a big full report to the Education Committee. And then we can do that through the proper process rather than the audit and risk, because I don't think that's the purpose of audit and risk.
Okay, thank you. So more of a comment, but welcome observations there, Councillor Ferguson, I'm sure. And I think we've kind of covered what we need to. We've got some actions to take forward. And I think in terms of the action plans, as we've got presented for us, in terms of the scope of what we're looking at, we'll get reports, a follow-up report back in 6 months for both these audits as well. So we can look forward to that and sort of take comfort in terms of how well the actions have been implemented, as well as look forward to our action, which is to follow through how the PEF reporting is explored with officers and chairs, vice chairs, etc. And thanks for your contribution, Councillor Brodie, because obviously that makes it easier to pave the way through the Education Committee. So that's helpful as well. So members, with that, if we go to the recommendations, I think we've given a fair airing to the reports in front of us. So are we happy to, with the action agreed, as Vlad's captured already, are we happy to say that we've noted and commented on the finalised internal audit reports? Okay, thank you. So that takes us on to the follow-up report, item 8, report by Assistant Director, Governance and Human Resources. We've got Richard Fox and Lindsay Wilson here to assist if members have any questions. I'll hand over to Richard and Lindsay if you want to add anything to the report in the first instance. So that's a no there. So members, any questions on item 8? Councillor Bretty.
How strange again. Page 84, planned work by management. Again, I think this is, for me, related a bit to internet security, check payments and going to backs. What happens if not everyone can get backs, because that does mean that if there is a digital failure, are we certain that is going to happen? What's the sort of what's the sort of implications if there's any risk in that?
Okay, thank you. So Lindsay, I don't know if you want to help Councillor Beretti with this one.
Yes, I think that the risk with sort of backs is minimum. Is the risk? There's always a risk with anything sort of electronic, but our experience of operating sort of backs is that it is a very robust process. The whole back sort of network, as it were, is very focused on sort of security. And it's checked not just by ourselves but by our sort of service providers. So it's called bottom line. But the whole, as I say, the whole backs process itself is very sort of secure and robust. I would say it's a lot better than checks. To be honest, my experience is that often we find checks get unfortunately lost in the post. And in terms of sort of numbers, there's still a number that are uncashed that we have to sort of monitor against. So appreciating there is a risk, a cyber risk anywhere in electronic life, I think it is actually probably a lot lower in the backs environment. So my advice would be, I think, stick with backs. It's a well-proven system. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beretti.
I know it's well proven, but I've had personal experience where I've actually received someone else's payment for something through backs simply because of a single digit error. And I think that is one of the things which I would say has that kind of risk been taken into account.
Thanks. I'm not sure
again,
sorry, Lindsay.
Specifics, Councillor, but generally, as I say, I can only again talk generalities. It is a very, very strong system, and ourselves we have a lot of checks and off that. So, but will instances like that happen? Yes. It tends to be human error where the imputation has been, the character has somewhere, I would suggest, been misapplied by whoever was inputting it in the first place. I can also say, with ourselves, we double check everything. So if a bank account is entered in our system, it's not one person doing it, it's one person doing it then being checked by another. So again, to try and reduce that type of sort of risk, can I give you 100%? Any mistakes will always occur where there's a human element to it, but we do try and minimise those where possible.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yes, if there's one thing about being human, it's that we are a constantly evolving mistake, some might say. Looking at, that's Appendix 1 in terms of the purchase ledger. If there's no comments on that, we'll go on to Appendix 2, which is the Mosaic Payments Residential Care. Any questions on this one? No, I don't see any hands up. So Appendix 3 is the Fostering, Adoption and Kinship Care. Any comments on this one? You'll notice in the recommendations, this is one where we're being asked to agree to receive a follow-up report, so we can take that one as read. Councillor Dryborough?
Yeah, Chair, I totally agree with that one. It comes back in 6 months' time. I think after the member seminar that we had the other week, I think social work are happy for that to happen as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's appropriate, Councillor Dryborough, thank you. So no comments on that just now. We'll go to Appendix 4, and that's the housing benefit, council tax reduction, discretionary housing payments. Any comments on that one? Malcolm Johnson. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just my own curiosity as much as anything else. It's just to do with actions relating to performance management and quality assurance processes were not accepted by management. Could you kind of flesh that out a bit? And have we decided that perhaps the requests on that were maybe slightly unreasonable, or why were they not adopted?
Thank you. I think that's over to Richard on this one.
First of all, I'd like to say that this was in the old style of reports when we didn't categorise recommendations into high, medium and low, and these would have been regarded as low impact recommendations at that time. We always have an ongoing dialogue with management about what is required from them. In this particular case, I'm happy to say that there were suggestions, but I'm happy to defer to management that they weren't cost-effective suggestions. So I'm happy for them not to be implemented.
Does that satisfy Councillor Johnson?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. It was just we've had in the time on this committee, there's quite often been all recommendations made that perhaps justifiably not followed through. But it's I'm always curious when they're not picked up. But no, that's fine. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dryborough, your hand's up. I'm not sure if that's a legacy one, but you're welcome to come in.
It's a legacy one here, sorry.
No worries, thank you. So with that then, I don't see any other hands up. Are we happy then with the recommendations to note and comment on the progress made? 2.2, agree to receive the follow-up on Mosaic payments, which I think we'll all be sort of reasonably versed in given the recent seminars, etc. And then at 2.3, agree that no further reports are required on the remaining subject areas. Okay, thank you. That takes us to item 9. So we've got the internal audit plan 2024-25, and we're being asked to approve the refreshed internal audit charter and then provide feedback on the internal audit plan. So Richard, do you want to say any words on it? No. Okay. Over to members. Councillor Beretti.
It's just a query about this, Chair, and I'm sure that older members might have the answer, but on page 101, where it says the approval at its meeting on the 16th of April. Now, if this is a public document and people are looking at this, might they not get confused that if it was published before the 16th of April and it's already been passed and we're actually on the 16th of April, am I having a déjà vu moment, or is there a reason for this?
Thank you, Councillor Beretti. Richard.
My apologies, Councillor Beretti. I think this is anticipation of your agreement. But once following this committee, this will be our working document for use within the council. And I was hopeful to anticipate your approval.
Councillor Beretti.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, would it have not been better to have reframed that in slightly different manner so that no one would get confused? Because it's fine that we as elected members scrutinise these things, but surely if the public, and there may well be members of the public who do go through these papers, they might find this a bit odd.
I can only apologise and say point noted. We'll do it better next year.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dryborough.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think this is a good report and taking into consideration what Councillor Beretti said there. I'm sure, we'll learn from it. I just wonder, Richard, if there's an opportunity, because there was something raised at Communities Committee about tenancy arrangements, leases and contracts that outside bodies use of our assets, if there's a potential for that to be added, because I believe there are some concerns. I know that Councillor Caroline Wilson has some issues in her ward, and it is an income that we do receive from the council, and I think we need to look at everything that we do get an income from. So I just wonder if we could potentially have a tenancy arrangements, leases or contracts from outside bodies that actually use our assets.
Thanks, Councillor Dryborough. I'll let Vlad come in on this as response.
Yes, thank you. And that's one that I know that has been raised through both members and officers. We did consider it at the time in terms of where that's best placed. And as you'll see within the papers, that in essence, where there's already ongoing work going on that will in essence assess that and report that back to members, then that would be the right route rather than doing an internal audit on that as well. And therefore, there's been an agreement, I understand, through Communities Committee for us to look at those agreements that are in place and those contracts and ensure obviously best value through that, and then that's reported to members through that work rather than through the internal audit function, if that makes sense to members.
Does that help, Councillor Dryborough, in terms of...
that's fine, Chair. As long as it's being looked at somewhere, that's great. As long as it goes back to Communities Committee, I'm sure they'll be pleased with that.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. So with that then, can we go to the recommendations and approve the refreshed internal audit charter, accepting that today is in fact the date mentioned in the charter, and we can note that, and also note and provide feedback to officers on the internal audit plan. So I think we've kind of touched on that as well. So are members happy with that?
Yeah, paper is now correct.
It will be as soon as we've agreed it. Yeah. Okay. So happy with that. On to item 10 is the annual governance statement for 2023-24, and we have Fraser and Jackie Holland, I think, maybe online to assist if members have any questions. Fraser, do you want to say a few words to this at the start? No. Members, any comments on this one or questions? Councillor Beretti.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Page 110, access a single point for contact with Police Scotland. Where are we with this particular part of the process? Because that has been mentioned in a various number of committee meetings.
Thank you. So, yeah, so I think page 110, it's one of the sort of white bullet points, the sort of ring bullet points. Are you able to speak to that one?
Thanks, Chair. I'd have to check with the relevant officer there. Obviously, that's an action that the Integra Group was established to do, so I'll need to double check to see if they've actually done that.
So I'll let Vlad come in.
Apologies, sorry, I didn't hear the question. Yes, I can confirm that that's been done, and it's myself.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vlad.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this from members? I don't see any hands up online. Councillor Beretti again.
I'm not hogging the questions, but page 118, and given we've just had full council last month, and referring to 338, Councillor Campbell alluded to a potential enlarging the climate officers working group and climate emergency group within the council. Is there going to be any work done in that, or are we actually going to look at this point?
So I'm not sure if this is specifically for this committee. Effectively, that's kind of saying that after that happened, this is what's happened. But I don't know, Fraser, if you can speak to that at all.
Not particularly, Chair. This is obviously just noting that there is a working group. Any kind of proposal to expand the membership of that would be taken forward through the agreed process, I think, from full council. I don't know if it was an action point. It'd be taken forward through there rather than this AGS document, which is fundamentally a historical document for the past year.
Yeah, thank you. So this does relate to 23-24, but I mean, I would take it that there will be discussions underway to see how improvements or enhancements to that kind of work can be taken forward.
I think, Chair, it was just in a question so that it's recorded that we are having oversight of this in light of the full council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dryborough.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's page 127, individual service work with a wide range of organisers and partners such as, and there is one specific one, Chair, that I talk about all the time that is missing from that list. I wonder if you know what that is.
Councillor Dryborough, I was about to pull you up because you hadn't mentioned it so far in the committee, but so I think
Association of Public Service Excellence.
So I think I'm looking around. There's some smiling faces, knowing looks, I would suggest, from some of the officers. So can we make sure that all the unmentionable bodies are added? Presumably, you're meaning APSI, of course, Councillor Dryborough.
Yeah, that's right, Chair. Cheers.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll get that added.
So Fraser's just assured that he'll get that added. So that's fine. With that, then, anything else from members? I can't see any other hands up. So can we agree the draft AGS and to delegate to Assistant Director of Governance and Human Resources to make any amendments prior to inclusion in the final audit accounts? Okay, thank you. That takes us to the Scrutiny Review Arrangements 2024. Again, Fraser is here to assist if members have any questions. Any comments at this point? So over to members. Councillor Beretti.
Page 131, very, very bottom point on point 4, where it says the initial long list of potential topics then circulated to political groups for shortlisting. But as we already have some independents or independent elected members, should that not have been slightly different, that context?
Yeah, thank you. So I think there is something about this where obviously this is the relevant decision-making committee, but I think we wouldn't want to inadvertently exclude members from being able to feed in or comment on some of the feedback. And I think if a political group must be 2 or more people, so I think there's maybe a wee amendment to that maybe could be considered in terms of not restricting access to any elected member, no matter what their status might be.
Yeah, no problem with that, Chair. We can circulate it, so if there's any member or members who are not formally part of a group, we would still ensure we would contact them so they would have a chance to feed into that sort of shortlisting kind of process.
Thank you. Does that satisfy Councillor Beretti?
Yeah, that's fine, thanks.
With that, I see no other hands up, so are we happy then to agree the Scrutiny Review arrangements as detailed, and obviously with that qualification that all elected members will be included in the appropriate way, and then to note the steps to progress the Scrutiny Review arrangements for 2024 detailed at 4.3. Okay, thank you. I have no other business, members. Thank you very much for all your contributions today, and to all the officers for their support. And with that, that's the meeting finished. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.